Good day there once again, viewers. This is your mate Kamikaze78 here, coming to you guys with some more Planetside 2 content. Today guys, we're going to be sticking to the path of horrendously late weapon reviews and finally get around to reviewing the VE-A Lacerta assault rifle available to the Vanu Sovereignty Combat Medic Division. So, this is the lucky last of our series of weapon reviews for the Doku assault rifles, and now we are left to wonder where this thing sits in the grand scheme of things compared to the other two weapons. We know the Arbalist, quite frankly, needs some work, and we know that the Vanquisher might be just that little bit too good. So where does the Lacerta sit? For those who are new to these weapon reviews, we'll first go over the stats for the weapon, followed by some weapon-specific strategy, and some discussions surrounding the attachment options for the weapon. But I also understand that some of you guys don't have the time to sit through a 10-minute plus weapon review, so let's go over a quick TLDR of the weapon and its performance before we get into the nitty-gritty. So, the Lacerta. I had a really good time using this weapon, I'm not gonna lie, and that's for one reason primarily. The recoil. There's always the joke in the Planetside community that the Vanu is easy mode due to their recoil and general weapon accuracy. But seriously, in my testing of this weapon, I struggled to get the recoil to actually drift too far from my original target that I was aiming at. You know, that joke is kind of become a bit more of a serious factor with this weapon. With all the previous weapons, bar maybe two off the top of my head that I've reviewed on this channel, I've at least been able to get some sort of deviation out of the recoil. But not here, and when you combine that with the weapon's hilariously long damage drop-off range, you actually find yourself with a weapon that is superbly competitive in medium-range firefights. If your crosshair placement is solid, CQC engagements can also be quickly turned in your favour with well-placed headshots, as you can potentially score one burst kills, which I will admit is rather funny to watch as light assaults who come charging at you with shotguns start questioning their place in their world as you start to one-burst them with bloody assault rifles. Hell, even the hipfire is rather amazing for what it is. So, what's the catch here? Surely there's a catch with this weapon. The catch is the one thing that makes the weapon so great. The accuracy. Because it is so accurate, you as a player need to be precise with it. The cone of fire doesn't allow for miracle, somewhat sloppy shots to hit a target at range. In fact, the cone of fire is strange. It can either be far too accurate or not quite accurate enough, and that's something that we will discuss later in the review. But the fact that this also is a burst fire weapon means that you can missample the fire rate and deal with some potential downtime between bursts. Being precise and calculated to make this weapon work is the key. Anyway, let's talk about the nitty and gritty of the weapon itself in the form of the statistics. As far as the weapon damage is concerned, we are looking at a maximum damage profile of 167 at the 10 meter mark, dropping off to a minimum damage profile of 125 after 90 meters. And that right there is an extreme amount of distance, so much so that this weapon's effective range hardly ever reaches the distance where the minimum damage is going to actually, kick in. So you will rarely have to even worry about hitting that minimum damage barrier. This sees the weapon sport a 6-shot kill at the 10 meter mark, a 7-shot kill between the 10 and 55 meter mark, and an 8-shot kill out at the 90 meter mark, which, yeah, look, an 8-shot kill in theory is going to be very rare, which means that you are going to comfortably be able to nail most of your targets in 3 bursts if you can keep the crosshairs on target. So, when we take a look at the damage model and combine it with the rate of fire of 566 rounds per minute, or 9.43 rounds per second, we can see ourselves with a theoretical time to kill of 0.54 seconds at the 10 meter mark, 0.64 seconds at the 55 meter mark, and 0.75 seconds at the 90 meter mark. Now, I'd like to make a point in all of my burst fire weapon reviews that these numbers are incredibly theoretical, as it requires you to cycle the weapon's refire rate perfectly to keep up with these stats. And some of you in the comment section of my recent burst fire reviews have also made it very clear that this is relatively easy to do by clicking and holding your mouse midway through your previous burst to set up another one to fire immediately after that one stops. Definitely a thing you can do, you just have to deal with the recoil a little bit more aggressively, as, you've got to consider that the first shot multiplier will still come into effect at the start of each burst. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind that these numbers around time to kill are still incredibly theoretical. Speaking of recoil for that matter, and first shot multipliers and all the bells and whistles, let's get into just how the Lacerta kicks, or, well, sort of kicks. In fact, no, let's just put it this way. It doesn't kick. The Lacerta doesn't kick. It just sort of jiggles. Yeah. Look, in practice, guys, this thing hardly moves. The graphic that you can see outlining the actual recoil spray on the left of your screen here was recorded at a 30-meter range with no attachments. And as you can see here, I didn't even bother with the orange or the red severity dots for how bad the recoil got. It simply wasn't needed. The weapon is simply a laser beam with some minor vertical and horizontal kick that really doesn't amount for much. On the weapon's absolutely worst day, when it comes out of the bar drunk as a skunk, you will only have to pull downwards on the mouse lightly to pull it back into line. It's honestly as easy as that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for all those who are interested in the numbers, we have a 0.3 degree vertical kick per shot, which is amplified at the start of every burst to 0.75 degrees per shot with a 2.5 times first shot multiplier. We also have a horizontal kick that ranges from 0.1 degree to 0.22 degrees, and while horizontal recoil tolerance is unknown at this stage, the weapon appears to have a horizontal tolerance that only allows for one kick in either direction before being forced back in the opposite direction again. The horizontal recoil angle is also a factor here, sitting between -5 to 5 degrees, but that isn't really that noticeable thanks to how mild everything else really is. The cone of fire values here are also impressively tight, with crouched still ADS fire being the true standout, being completely accurate on the first shot. What you will notice though is things get a little bit more eccentric once you're moving. More discussion on that in a few minutes. Ammo wise, the weapon comes with a better than average, actually, 33 rounds per mag and a 231 round ammo pool to boot, which is a fairly nice, decent bit of ammo to get into combat with. That is also reloaded in 1.95 seconds short and 2.4 seconds long. Additionally, the weapon has an ADS movement speed of 0.5 times and a muzzle velocity of 500 meters per second. And that wraps up this amazing little package here that is the Lacerta, and that right there should really give you guys an idea of what my opinion on the weapon is. I really enjoyed using the Lacerta. This is very much a weapon that is the VS's take on the TR's amazing Saber 13. It follows the exact same damage model, but it just accomplishes the medium range burst fire mode in a slightly different way, being a 3-round burst as opposed to a 2-round burst. I have personally really enjoyed using this thing to tap heads at range and see some incredibly satisfying triple headshot kills pop up. It really is a big comparison to the last weapon we reviewed, but there are some things that I have learnt to make the most of the weapon here. Firstly, the muzzle velocity of the weapon here is really where it's going to start to let you down. With only 500 meters per second, it's certainly not the speediest boy of the crop when it comes to actually connecting with your target. And when you start to use this thing out at a medium range against targets that are moving, that very much becomes obvious. You do have to lead a considerable amount, and tracking your target as they try to dodge, dip, duck, dive, and dodge through your plasma fire can be challenging at the best of times. I've personally found it at times just to be a little bit too difficult even to use at range for this very reason, but that it could also be my shithouse aiming ability too, so who knows. All I will say is that this is a weapon that is certainly not built for tracking long-range moving targets, and is very much about holding down choke points at longer ranges where enemies have less horizontal movement room under their belt. But in saying that, considering the lacking quote-unquote force of the recoil, it is actually pretty easy to get over, that lacking muzzle velocity with some practice. Just don't expect the muzzle velocity to be doing all the work for you on moving targets. One thing that I've also had to learn the hard way here with this thing is not to strafe when firing the weapon. Like, at all, if you can help it. Remember how I mentioned earlier that the cone of fire can either be too accurate or not accurate enough? Well, that's what we're talking about here. The cone of fire, when standing and aiming down sights, increases by a whopping 5 times when you're moving, which can really throw the aim off rather brutally, and when you're crouched and moving, it moves up to 0.06, which is obviously a lot worse than 0.0, nothing. And is an issue that I found myself having to constantly deal with when trying to counter-engage snipers. I would try to strafe and fire at the same time to throw the enemy's aim off, but the way in which the rounds diverged ever so slightly was more than enough for me to ruin my time to kill and actually get domed as a result of that. Now personally, I can see why the devs have done this, but I think the cone of fire value increase is a little bit on the extreme side, considering that you have a muzzle velocity that already limits the weapon heavily in one aspect. With there being such a heavy focus on standing still, you quickly become an easy target for people to dome you at a range if you want to keep your accuracy at its best. So I think that this is pretty much the only aspect I would say that needs a great deal of attention here for the weapon. If they were to address the massive cone of fire increase but keep the muzzle velocity as it were, I'd actually be really okay with that. Now, my last tip that I can offer with the weapon is to keep an eye on your ammo use. Yes, reload times here are very attractive and see you with very little downtime, but there have also been many occasions where I've run out of bullets when trying to kill some slippery infiltrator because I haven't been keeping track of my mag count, thus him turning around and blasting my head clean off. Nothing more awkward than getting in a medium range firefight also and, you know, being held prisoner by the confines of your goddamn magazine. This may sound like common sense stuff, but hey, I see it happening to me more often than not with burst fire weapons, but that's just me anyway. Anyway, let's just say you like the look of the weapon and want to reach out and touch some of those silly non-believers of the Vanu way with some good old technology. Let's go over some of the weapon attachments here and see what we can do to better improve the Lacerta. The weapon has access to 1x to 4x reflex sights, including a 1x R&V sight, an enhanced plasma containment barrel, that's always a handful of words, I can never get it out in a smooth sentence, a dark light flashlight, laser sight, forward grip, vented power core, high velocity ammo, and lashing ammunition. So, first things first, sights. You should definitely source a sight as soon as possible because target clarity at range is an amazing thing to have, and an absolute necessity for a long-range gun. As far as the next attachment is concerned, I would definitely source the high velocity ammo as soon as you can, only for that muzzle velocity increase that helps dealing with ranged targets. When you compare it to the rest of the available attachments, this is the one that takes the weapon's main downside and helps to make it less painful to deal with, so it's a no-brainer. The laser sight is actually what I would say next, because the forward grip here, let's be honest, is completely unnecessary. Horizontal recoil is not really a problem here, so why put on an attachment that increases your equip time, but also doesn't really do much else for you? Doesn't make much sense. The laser sight gives you that little bit more forgivability in close quarters environments for hip firing against those surprise light assaults and infiltrators. And yeah, look, if you want to grab the barrel attachment, go for it. It ain't going to make much of a difference here at all. And for those wondering about lasher ammunition, for me, don't bother. This is a longer ranged emphasis burst fire weapon, and the lashing ammunition slashes your muzzle velocity by 50%. I personally did give it a go, didn't enjoy it, didn't really see the need for it in the long run, so in my opinion, leave the lashing ammunition at the door, save yourself some certs. And guys, with all that said, that concludes today's weapon review on the VE-A Lacerta. I had a really good time reviewing this thing. I think it's definitely in a good place right now, just needs a little bit of fine tuning on the cone of fire side of things, and I think you'll have yourself a weapon that is really well balanced. Really well balanced and in a good place right now. If you guys enjoyed today's weapon review, a backhand of that like button would be greatly appreciated, and if you find yourself new to the channel, backhand that subscribe button whilst you're at it. As always guys, my social media links are linked in the description down below. Be sure to come follow us on Twitch. I always love streaming with you guys and getting to know you guys on a bit more of a personal level, but beyond what the videos allow for me to do. And you can also find my Discord and Twitter down below there as well, guys. Once again, hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.